Greetings and welcome, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you our group's project, which is for increasing workforce engagement and communication. Our group and team members are Vilma Gonzalez from DPSS, John Howieson from DMH, Jeff Klien from RRCC, and myself, Jacklin Injijian from the library. So before we begin, we wanted to discuss the details of our presentation and how, as leaders, we can be the drivers of success through an engaged and involved workforce. So we wanted to share with you a video that we found to be an example of what a team and workforce looks like when there's failure in this, when they're feeling unengaged, uninformed, or having poor communications. So let's begin.
And that looks like another set of slicks to me, James.
It's absolutely extraordinary. When Starlo came in a moment ago, they have those slicks and dries ready for it.
Right rear.
They're not ready on the left rear. There's no tyre. Right rear, I beg your pardon, there's no tyre here.
I've never seen anything like it. There's no tyre to put on.
Oh, I thought we had one when the race started, he's saying. Well, this is ludicrous. This is
Now we're going to have a committee meeting about it. Stick it on and send him out.
a major misorganisation problem there.
All right, so as we see, we had a major misorganization problem here, and the recommendation was to have a committee meeting. So essentially, we need to look at these circumstances, understand how devastating it can be when groups are not working well with each other, they're feeling not unengaged or having a lack of communication. So we're going to dive into how we can improve this issue and have a more engaged workforce. All right, so our presentation, what we're going to do is capture the workforce sentiment. What is it that our group is experiencing as a team? Then we're going to look at how we can drive improved positive employee engagement and workplace experience, employee and organizational productivity, increased communications, both internally and externally, how we can look at a gap analysis to overcome our challenges and our failures, and then looking at our leadership roles, what kind of call to action we can take, how we celebrate our wins, identifying our successes and sharing them, and how we can repeat this. So first, we have the cycle of workforce engagement. We want to look at how we can improve the engagement process. So essentially with this, we want to make sure we have a baseline measure. We want to survey our teams. We want to know what they're feeling and why they're feeling it. So we need to identify and define clear goals and measures that we can essentially take through an analysis by way of potentially a survey. And we know that surveys are the ones that pretty much solicit feedback in an anonymous way that is less threatening to the workforce. Then when we have the results and we need to analyze them, we need to quantify the responses, identify data trends, identify patterns, see if we have any projections that can be taken into account when looking at the data. Then we need to share our outcomes. We don't want to just solicit the information. We want to be able to share back. People actually took time to respond to these surveys or even any type of inquiry we put out. So we want to be able to share that back. And we also want to make sure that when we get this information, we share it back, be intentional on what kind of adjustments as a department or an organization we're willing to make. What does this look like? Why did we get it? How do we want to plan our changes as it relates to this? One more thing, when you're surveying, don't look at it in a traditional perspective. You can have one-on-one meetings, small group setting discussions, focus groups as a way to solicit information. Then measuring engagement. How do we measure? First, you have to invest the time. You can't do any of this without putting in the time towards your group. So we look at it in 3 tiers. You look at it in terms of the organizational level. You look at it in terms of the partnership peer level and the individual level. When looking at the organization, how is your mission and vision aligning? Is this true and standard? Has this been communicated clearly? Is your leadership visible? Are they at the forefront or are they in the background? Does your workforce feel connected to your leadership? And is your leadership, in fact, championing change and innovation? Or are they just at the pedestal, so to speak? Then we have the partnerships and the peers. Peer advocacy, peer support, peer relationships, and team relationships. All of this matters when you're looking at workplace engagement. How does a team thrive if they're successful, if they're a good group, they're working well together? How can you expand on this for other areas of your workforce? Then you have the individual level. Does an employee feel recognized? Are their efforts something that they feel is being understood and recognized by their management and their leadership? Also, Take account of their personal development goals. Is there anything that you can do as an organization and as a leader to help support that? And finally, what is it that you can do to help retain your workforce and keep them involved? But all of this and none of this can be possible without proper communication. And to speak more to this, I'm going to invite Jeff Klien to take on the conversation of communication.
All right, thanks, Jacklin. I'm going to talk about, as mentioned, communications, but not just any kind of communications, really strategically and deliberately communicating with your team or different audiences within your organization. It all begins and ends with proper and strategic communications, and it's really how we avoid those major misorganizations, and we avoid those unnecessary committee meetings that I know we all try to really avoid having on our day. So it really, proper communications and strategic communications impacts our approach. We get buy-in through that. How we communicate can empower people or disempower people. That's something that I'm going to talk a lot about. Then also we present a perception about our team and ourselves within the organization. A lot of people generally think of perception as maybe a facade, but in this case, we're thinking about a perception of how your team really engages within the organization. What do you want to convey about yourself and your team? So we've come up with 3 areas, and all these are equally important. One is about the audience. Another is about being deliberative and intentional, and the other is about self-awareness and interpersonal skills. So all 3 I'm going to talk about in a little more detail. Just as a reminder, we have a document we put together. If anyone's interested in more information, we're happy to share that as well. Okay, so there's a lot of different types of target audiences. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on downstream audiences. We generally think of downstream audiences as the teams that we lead. And the teams that we have responsibility over. There's other audiences, there's upstream audiences, there's lateral audiences across our organization, there's external audiences. We speak a certain language here in the county. When we interact with stakeholders outside the county, that would be an external audience. And there's mixed audiences. But going back to downstream audiences, again, we want to talk about empowering language versus disempowering language or approach. Also, one thing we do when we use strategic communication is we can really affirm the leadership within our own organization or within our own teams. For example, if you have multiple layers of maybe section heads or other leaders in your team, the way you communicate with them and with the team can really affirm their leadership. Okay, so we also want to be deliberative and intentional when we communicate. There's a lot more to this, but just from a high level, think ahead about how you want to strategize your communication. Everything begins with strategizing your communication because that's how you set the tone. That's the wordings you've chosen, the phrasing you like to use to emphasize themes and organizational philosophies. Be consistent with that wording and phrasing. And then also think about, again, how we empower. And so I've referenced the word empowering a lot. When we start really getting into it, that's language that really uplifts or raises up the people in our organization and the people within our teams. And not taking a deliberative approach to empower, you can really inadvertently disempower your team, and none of us want to do that. We also want to make sure that we are documenting and taking notes. A lot of times we think of documenting and taking notes as developing action items, and that's absolutely true. But when we take notes and we document during our meetings or interactions, we demonstrate to the others in our team that we are aware of them, we're listening, and we're valuing what they say. And also, it's important to always remember to celebrate your wins. Every day we have wins in our organization. Right? There might be daily tasks that we complete or big milestones. Think about which wins you want to celebrate and how you want to do it and how you want to use that to elevate people. On the right, you can see some aspects to different meetings and components of meetings. So there's a lot of different tools available where you can go ahead and do that. Okay, and lastly, about self-awareness, interpersonal skills. Every day we interact with our organization, we interact with our team, we're either adding to the trust or eroding the trust that we have in ourselves and our teams. Think about how you want to promote trust. Always be yourself. If you see a leadership skill that you want to emulate, don't try to copy that leader, but you want to take some of those skills or those approaches and incorporate it into what you're comfortable with as a leader. You want to be authentic and genuine. We want to use active listening. There's a lot of different types of active listening, but always remember there's verbal active listening, and many people forget, but there's nonverbal active listening. How we act in meetings, how, the expressions on our face, things like that. You may not be speaking, you may be listening to someone speaking, but just remember that people in your team are always paying attention to you. Also, we want to make sure we provide context and justification. If someone has a great idea, then explain why, and you can demonstrate why you show trust in their leadership or trust in their decision making. But if it's not a good suggestion, maybe it's constructive criticism that you feel is misapplied, look for nuggets that you can segment out and then elevate those nuggets as ways to improve. Also, I want to make a quick mention of informal leaders. We all know who these are within our teams, within our organizations. They don't hold the position of leadership, but they are people that a lot of individuals in the organization gravitate towards. Get to know them, communicate with them. And then lastly, make sure you aren't reacting when you're pushed outside of your comfort zone. It's very common for us to want to push back. Build in maybe some cushions or phrases that allow you to take a breath and take a minute so you don't react negatively. And so on that note, I'm going to turn over to Vilma. She's going to talk a little more about engagement.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jeff, for that. In this portion of the presentation, I will share some tools that leaders can use to engage staff at different levels, such as when an employee is not performing, as well as when their well-being is at stake. As discussed earlier, communication is key in staff engagement, as it is a predictor of finding out reasons why staff may or may not be engaged. In this slide, I'm sharing with you the Engage Feedback Checklist, which was shared with us during our psychology and safety class back in April. It is a self-assessment tool which a leader can use to self-check before engaging in a conversation with their staff, especially if it has to do with a discussion with underperforming. This is a self-awareness list with questions such as, am I able to hold my staff accountable without blaming? Can I genuinely thank someone for their efforts rather than criticize their shortcomings? This interactive engagement calls for a check yourself before you wreck yourself and to set aside emotions and focus primarily on the professional interactions. On the next slide, we have the gap analysis, which is a conversation tool of engagement to engage employee in providing an explanation for their behavior or performance. This tool provides for an opportunity to explore alternatives for a mutually agreeable outcome. For example, an employee continuously creates overdue assessments. And in this discussion, the employee may explain that he schedules appointments around his work days at the office, and there are schedules that are out of his control. In this discussion, the supervisor can lay out monthly calendar with cutoff dates to avoid overdues. Now, for this tool to be successful, it is crucial to ensure leaders follow up with a touch point meeting to ensure that the mutually agreeable solution is in place. For these two tools are useful when dealing with performance, but what about when the staff's well-being negatively affects their performance? Next slide. How can we as leaders assist our teams? As we know, the work across nations were challenged with the pandemic, and as COVID-19 infection flattened, more people became vaccinated, and many agencies resumed the in-person interactions to improve productivity in the workplace. In this next slide, we have an example of human resources agency in collaboration with different agencies that develop strategies for leaders to use amid opening its door to the public. In preparation to bring back staff from telework, agencies establish routine schedules and work, establish routines and schedules, define new goals and tasks, establish workplace safety procedures, such as the social distancing and body temperature screening. They also address uncertainty and work questions about the new policy and procedures, such as the COVID sick pay leave of vaccine exemptions. Leaders are called upon to lend an empathetic shoulder for staff who experience anxiety, grief, or exhaustion. Leaders' roles are called upon to create an environment for opportunities of engagement and to be mindful, present, and transparent, and to lead by example. On this, though, I want to point out that leaders, of course, are humans, and as humans, we're not immune to the impact of this unprecedented stress. Leaders lead by example does not mean putting up a brave face and pushing through your own reality. It means taking good care of yourself so you can take care of your team. As we have all seen in the past several months, experiencing a stressful public health crisis like COVID can clearly have a negative effect on our staff. How and what we do to support our employees during this time can be meaningful, especially post-pandemic. Which brings me to the 5 elements of ongoing support. Research has identified these 5 essential elements related to better recovery from adverse ongoing experience after the initial crisis. Think of cover, calm, connect, competence, and confidence. To cover is to being able to move towards to a greater feeling of safety, being able to remain calm, feeling connected, and ultimately having confidence, having a sense of optimism, faith, and hope. All of these, if all of these 5 C's are in place, leaders can drive and create a culture of trust and staff engagement. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, John.
Thank you, Vilma. So in keeping with the theme of this course, we have a call to action. Anything we learn only becomes useful if we are deliberate in making improvements. One way to do this is to answer the question, what specific action will I take to improve communication and engagement? So to provide an example of employee engagement, we have a comparison of how 2 county departments are handling return to work. And you can kind of see which one sounds more like how your department handled it. So the setup is it's early 2021. Many departments still work from home, and the first vaccine is being made available to first responders and the elderly. Again, this is how they're handling return to work. So Department A, like many, didn't really have a plan. They're waiting for a county decision or directives, but they're also discussing internally at the executive level. They didn't engage closely with staff. They didn't communicate any decisions to staff before they were made. So this may not have originated actually from trying to hide the decision-making process, but it did come from not deliberately engaging with staff. What this caused was an anxiety for the staff in both personal and professional lives. They're worried about childcare, they're worried about commutes, they're worried with how long their staff is going to be remote working. And it leads to frustration, gossip, reliance on rumor. So Department B was a department that provided services directly to the public. They needed to open up their doors back to the public. So to gauge the climate of their staff, a survey went out to affected employees, and they were asked their concerns for what type of support they would need in return to work with public interaction. The results were somewhat surprising. Most of the staff was actually willing to return to work. However, they wanted access to the vaccine and a clear social distancing guidelines. The department's director was able, based on that feedback, able to coordinate with the public health to provide access to the vaccine, and clear social distancing guidelines were drafted. What this caused was staff felt their voices were heard and they were less reluctant to return to work. Now I pass it back to Jacklin for some closing thoughts.
All right, everybody. So we're about to wrap up. What did we learn from this experience and the presentation? Well, we decided as a group that we would come up with our own acronym for TEAM. TEAM stands for trust and teamwork, engagement, appreciation, mentorship, and motivation. And to illustrate this, we wanted to take you back to another video to demonstrate how, when all of this is working well, when your engaged workforce is in tune, you're communicating and you have great involvement both on the leadership and staff levels, what does this look like? All right, so In that sense, that concludes our presentation. We wanted to thank everybody. We wanted to show you what it looks like to be a team that's cohesive and working well, feeling engaged, communicating well, understanding each other's roles, seeing where the leadership are, where the support team is behind us and in front of us, and how we can succeed and be on the podium as we see here on the photos. Here's our team. We took a little snippet. We took advantage of media, and we also wanted to take advantage of this time and say thank you to our team champions, Amy Chavez, Carl Cooper, and Diane Iglesias. And we open the floor to our Q&A and congratulate everybody. We finished it. We're at the finish line. Congratulations to the entire ELDP team.